we've now matured, right? We're in a different world of Salesforce. Now we're going into the world of tech debt. Lots of people have been working in orgs. We're specializing down now and then really becoming, good at our niche.
Welcome to Salesforce Radio, your destination for insights, news, and community connections within the dynamic Salesforce ecosystem. Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining. Welcoming to Salesforce Radio. Today, we've got Francis Pindar, technical architect and coach in the Salesforce ecosystem, and, of course, founder of London's Calling, one of the great Salesforce conferences. So,
thank you.
What a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, no, it's been quite a long journey. It's going to be our 10th year next year for London's Calling, so it's going to be a bit crazy.
Wow. And were there any breaks in between? Did you have a break for COVID?
That's an interesting story. So the big COVID lockdown in the UK was like on the Saturday, and our event was on the Friday. And it literally was about 2 weeks prior to that, we kind of went, right, all the kind of big gatherings had been stopped. So anything under 500 people was allowed, anything above wasn't allowed. So we're like, we can't have anybody come into the venue, any attendees, right? And that was 2 weeks out. It's like, what on earth do we do on the day now? And so we basically just got everybody to record all their sessions, and we did everything online. And there was about 10 of us at the venue. A couple of speakers came along to do their talks live. But essentially it was about, crew. And actually not even all the organizers were there. I think it was like just 2-3 of us, and the rest were kind of online as well. So,
right. I guess once you have the venue, there's not really, you might as well show up.
Exactly. Yeah. We had it, there's food ordered and stuff like this. Couldn't really get out of it. So it was like, we might as well use it. And then, everybody's kind of congregating there. So, we did it, and we basically had a room each pretty much in the venue. So, it was a mental time. Luckily, we stream all the rooms anyway every year. So it wasn't a big leap to then pre-record everything and then, get that streamed online. But it was crazy.
I'm sure. Oh yeah. I mean, all the events that took place in those years were definitely crazy. And the ones that happened were crazy. The ones that didn't happen were also crazy. And I'm happy that there's been, that you've bounced back, and now it's been a couple of years already since then. And I know a bunch of people from my team joined this year, and they had great things to say. And you told me that typically it's on the hottest day of the year, basically every time.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, it's like every year. I'm always a bit worried because we have these kind of an outside courtyard area with these kind of big kind of gazebo tent things. And it was always a little bit, is it going to rain? If it rains, what do we do? And we give out T-shirts as well. So, attendees get T-shirts. And we always do that outside. It's like, well, if it rains, where do we do it? I have no idea. So we've never really had a rain plan. So, it's kind of like winging it on the day pretty much. So, but so far, 10 years of not raining. So,
wow,
we'd be lucky.
That's amazing.
9 years.
So I want to hear, where London's Calling came from and how that happened. But I think, as we've done in this podcast with most of the episodes, first, I'd love to get a little bit of story of your journey into the Salesforce ecosystem, where, you're coming from, what your background was like, and how you got to where you are today. And definitely would love to weave in a little bit of the conference into that as well, so I can understand, where that was born out of.
So I kind of started kind of really early on in the UK, especially in the Salesforce world. So it must be like 14, 15 years ago. And nobody knew about cloud computing. Nobody knew about Salesforce, and it was always that difficult question of, what do you do at working cloud compute, Salesforce, what's that? It's a cloud computing platform. What's that? And I just work in IT, and it was made it easy.
But you want to fix something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, you do websites. Why? But my history before that was a developer doing e-commerce sites in the UK. And I did a computing degree and kind of came out of the .com boom, I suppose, doing websites and things like that, which was kind of an interesting time in itself. And then I kind of got into visual effects. So I worked for a film visual effects company.
What did visual effects mean at the time? We're going back, are you saying about 16 years at this point?
Yeah, it's probably actually just my journey into Salesforce. So I got a job at a visual effects company, and they wanted me to basically look at their doing e-learning online, because I'd already done a bit of e-learning in another guise, nothing to do with technology, well, Salesforce. And they brought me in to build a learning platform for them. But then also they said, hey, we got this guy building this CRM. I was like, really? And they were building an in-house CRM. And I looked at what was available online and found Salesforce, and then we implemented it. And I was like, yeah, this is the future of, software basically at the time and technology. And I just jumped straight in and got a job at a consultancy, and the rest is history, really.
So let me get this straight. So they said, hey, we're implementing a CRM. And then you're like,
yeah, I kind of
went.
I was kind of like, this is mental. This is a bit mental. Like
because they're building it from scratch.
Yeah, they're building it from scratch, and it's like, well, you've got the UI there, but you've got no reporting, right? So how is that useful?
Right.
It just didn't make any sense to me. So I was like, look, let's see what the other options we have. And I found, or was it Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce, was it Sage CRM or something else? Yeah, a couple of others.
Sure.
But the moment I saw Salesforce, it was like, yeah, this is it, right? This is what we need to have. And also even there was an app it doesn't even know, it was App Exchange. I think App Exchange had just launched at the same time, and somebody built a very crude classroom management app. And yeah, we got that for managing the in-house classrooms and training, because the visual effects company kind of did training as well as post-production in the film industry. Mm-hmm. So we kind of did the Narnia films, a bit of Harry Potter as well.
Wow.
And that's actually how I got interested in visual effects, was actually being on Harry Potter as a kind of a stunt double on Harry Potter. And I saw the visual effects. I was like, oh, this is cool. I want to learn more. And that got me the job into VFX, which got me interested in Salesforce. And the rest is history.
So you had a computing background in school, but then you were also doing stunt doubles for Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the company I was working for at the time was like I was contracting, and they were quite happy for me to dive off and do a shoot for a couple of days or a week or whatever, and then come back again. Because they weren't paying me for it, and as long as I got stuff done, they were happy. So I'm kind of doing this on the side for a bit of fun and kind of a different thing than just doing IT. But yeah, that got me interested in visual effects. So.
And which got you interested in Salesforce.
Yeah. I don't think, I kind of think, if it wasn't for Harry Potter, maybe I wouldn't have found Salesforce, or maybe I would. I don't know. Yeah.
What do you have any recollection of like what it was when you were started looking for different CRM systems? What it was about Salesforce that got you? Like, do you think it was more of a marketing thing? Do you think it was something technical? Like,
no, it was definitely the technical side. I think it was definitely wait a minute, this can scale up to 5,000 users if I wanted to, and I can still make changes to it. Because at the time, I kind of come from this development background where it's like, servers, virtual server, or even just virtual servers almost didn't exist right at that time.
Right.
A little bit, but not really. Nobody really doing it in anger. And so, it was always thinking, oh God, how much hardware do we need? Performance testing, all that kind of stuff. And then it's like, oh, you don't need to do performance testing. Oh, you just create a field and an object, and it immediately appears in reporting. This is cool. Back then though, there were challenges. Like there was Apex, but it was really basic, and S controls were still around for those that remember those. It had lots of governor limits and different governor limits based on where it was executed as well, which made it even more complicated. It was, I definitely went, this is the future. I've kind of jumped straight into this.
So it sounds like it was two things. It was basically the fact that it was already based in the cloud, and that was something that seemed like an ideal at the time, but also just reporting capabilities, or was it like...
Yeah, and I think the how well it was, I could configure it and get reporting without having to build the reporting as well, right?
Right.
And the security as well, it was just there, right? And again, I didn't have to do too much to kind of configure the security and the logic within it. Although you did kind of, Flow didn't exist, there's lots of things that didn't exist. You kind of had to jump to code a lot. But I came from a coding background, so it wasn't too alien. But yeah, it definitely was like, yeah, this has just got to be the future, and it was.
That's amazing. And so, I mean, and then you've stuck with it since. I mean, that was the beginning of the journey, and then you just kind of continued from there. So
yeah, and I had
if you implemented it there, basically you ended up implementing Salesforce, or there was still something?
So there was we got a partner in to do it, which were basically two guys who were probably the only guys in the UK that knew how to do it, I think, at the time, because it was literally so new.
Right.
And yeah, I kind of worked with them, and they kind of taught a lot, as they were building it. And I think they were learning it as well at the time. And,
sure.
It was all a little bit of a, crazy journey. And then I kind of quit that job and just did a month of just learning everything I could about it. Luckily, Salesforce had put 2 of their courses online, all the videos of 2 of the courses, or the 2 certifications basically they had at the time. And I basically, watched all of that content, applied for a job at a consultancy, and then got the job. I think the one and only consultancy in the UK, I think, at the time.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. And I managed to get through the interview somehow. I think it was probably lack of people applying who knew sales was probably quite a good argument. Yeah. And then it was a bit of a baptism of fire. I remember I was on 12 projects, and I was like, how can I do all how do I cut my week up? It's just impossible, right? Just the amount of interest in Salesforce and just not having enough people around. It was a crazy time.
So from the time that you learned about Salesforce till when you're in this, a consultancy, Salesforce had picked up a lot of steam, or were people going out?
It was
talking about Salesforce?
So I do remember I basically had two people offered me a job. It was this smaller consultancy, and it was Capgemini. And Capgemini were just starting off their practice. And I would have been employee number 2 of their Salesforce practice in the whole of Europe. And although it might have been a good opportunity for me, who'd done a month's worth of learning plus a bit of work at this company, I was like, seems terrifying. Can't be on projects really not knowing anything.
Sure.
So I went with this smaller consultancy, which had about 12 people there, I would say, 10, 12 people. And I was like, I can learn from them, right? And I can figure out the platform. If I do get stuck, I know there's people there to help me. So I kind of went with the smaller consultancy, and now Cap's huge with teams all over the UK and dedicated to different parts of the country and stuff. So and the rest of the world. So it's grown massively, as we all know.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've all seen so much growth in the platform and the ecosystem, and it's amazing to me how people can really stay feeling connected, stay within, and someone like yourself who's been basically involved without any breaks, I guess, for a decade and a half, something like that. It's always interesting to hear how people kind of have taken those journeys and the imprints that they've left, like that first company you're with, where you set up Salesforce, and then sooner or later you're gone, and they still got it, it's still working. Maybe someone else came in and did something else, but
still,
you leave your little trails everywhere.
And there's still marks that haunt me for today. To today, there's a early org that I worked on, and debugging at the time was really horrible. And I remember really bad practice. I'd get Salesforce to email me when it hit exceptions and things like this, right? I'm still getting emails from a particular org a decade ago. I only get them like once a month or something. And it's that kind of has code 4 in the subject, and that's it. And I'm like, I've really got to tell them that maybe they should switch that off. But there's some bit of code somewhere. Somebody came up to me actually once saying, I've seen your name in our code in our org. I'm like, oh my word, which client is it? It's one of those really early ones that's really horrible code.
Right. Meanwhile, it's still there. It's still sitting there.
Yeah, it's still in there.
And I think that's and it's funny. So you saw from the beginning, you saw the scalability, at least the potential for scalability with Salesforce. Meanwhile, the things that you were doing, I guess, weren't so scalable if some of the things.
No, exactly.
Because you had to do it manually.
And also, it's like, it was very crude back then, right? You don't have all the rich stuff that you have in Apex now. So I think if people looked at old code in Salesforce on, some of the early APIs and versions, they'll be like, what the hell is this? What's going on here? It's doing all these loops and stuff. Like, why don't they just use a search or whatever, whatever it was? And it's like, well, because we didn't have it, right? We were limited to the scope of what was available at the time. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting. And I think this is where we've now matured, right? We're in a different world of Salesforce. That's the early days of, greenfield sites, you're creating. Now we're going into the world of tech debt. Lots of people have been working in orgs, and we're now going into a different kind of maturity of Salesforce, right? Where you can't be a master of everything, when back then you could. It's just one core platform with stuff in it, right? But now you can't. And even industries, even if you're a Salesforce developer or architect or whatever, you're not a generalist anymore. You're in a specific industry or a different part of Salesforce. So I think this is where we're kind of moving now in the whole ecosystem. We're specializing down now and really becoming, good at our niche, essentially.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. So, I mean, where do you find yourself today? Like, at what point did you say, okay, I've got all this general knowledge about Salesforce. I've done so many different things in so many different places. Mm-hmm. It's time to now be a little bit more concise. It's time to now move into a certain corner of the ecosystem. Or have you been able to keep it more?
Yeah. So I think for me, it was the pace of innovation, right? And as Salesforce buys more, started to buy more and more products, and there's more and more teams, innovating on their own products, and you just can't keep up, right? And so for me, it was a kind of that light bulb moment of, actually, to do a good job for someone, I need to be specialized in a certain area. I don't want to be just searching Google or ChatGPT for the answers all the time. I want to provide a good service to the company I'm working for, the client I'm working for. And actually, to do that, I have to niche down, right? I don't do marketing cloud, and I never want to, really, because that's an area that I know if I get into, I did a long time ago, but I'm not going to give as much value as the next person, right? That's done it for years and years in, different industries, or the same industry the client's in or the organization's in, right? So yeah, it's kind of knowing your limits, really, and what you can learn, and knowing that you can't know it all. It's impossible.
Right. And it is kind of an interesting paradox of the whole platform, that to be a master doesn't mean you know it all. To be a master means that you understand certain things about the place where you are and what you're doing and what you need to, bring to your users or to your work. Mm. And, and I guess that kind of brings us to this idea of being an architect. And I know that's something, you, on your podcast, you're speaking with architects typically. So, what does it mean to you to be a technical architect? What does it mean to be a Salesforce architect?
That question is great, right? Because you basically said technical architect and Salesforce architect. And I think in the Salesforce ecosystem, people get very wrapped up in technical architect, right? But for me, it's not the utopian goal of Salesforce to be a technical architect, right? You need to be a good rounded Salesforce architect, and that doesn't necessarily mean just technical. It's the business side as well, understanding the value it brings, how you communicate with stakeholders, and that whole side as well of it as well. But also, it's that kind of understanding that really we are all architects that work in the Salesforce platform, right? Mm-hmm. And I kind of always think of it as, architectural design is very much, when you're designing a Salesforce solution, everything is obviously design, but there's only part of it that's architectural design. And that piece of architectural design is anything that's going to be hard or expensive to change in the future. And that is it, really. That is architectural design. And if you're an admin and you create an object in Salesforce, and then you create interconnected objects to it, and then you create some flows on top of that, and then maybe there's an integration there, or reports and dashboards and things like that. And then suddenly this object that you decided to create, it's going to be hard to change, right?
Right.
And expensive to change. So that was an architectural decision, whether you like it or not, right? As an admin, you just did that. And so I think that's really important to understand, that essentially you are an architect if you're making those hard to change and expensive to change things within Salesforce, and making sure that you know that the security is correct on that object, that those relationships are correct, and you don't have to go back and change them, and the massive complications that could have with your data, later on. So yeah, I think that's my take on a Salesforce architect, and that we are all Salesforce architects.
I love it. It's in, when you're talking about this, it's something I think about a lot, because my position has always been, I'm coming as a third party. I'm a salesperson. I'm selling software that sits on top of Salesforce that is made to make the lives of admins easier, made, to make even the lives of developers easier, because then they're not going to have to be developing things that really there's no business developing, because it should just be easier to do. Forms, documents, all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that we come across a lot is, nonprofits or even universities, let's say, who got involved with Salesforce because Salesforce said, hey, take an org, take 10 seats, have fun. And then they started doing it, and they're like, well, we don't really know what to do with this. So they went on and they looked for a volunteer, or they found, their secretary became all of a sudden an admin. And talk about technical debt. I mean, what happens in these orgs. It got crazy. I mean, people started doing all sorts of things. And then as the organization matures and as they start to use Salesforce more, they're realizing there's certain things here that just don't make sense. Maybe it's that volunteer we took 5 years ago who really didn't have any experience, or maybe it's, that time we made the program registration woman into an admin, and she didn't, know left from right when it came to anything technical. And now, of course, now she has now been, she now works at some high tech company.
Yeah,
and
she's got skills on the left,
right? Of course, we didn't realize we gave her like the golden ticket. She was the best person we ever had for the registrations for the summer camp, and now, she's a Salesforce admin in some tech company. But it's a great point you make, basically, that anyone who goes in there and starts, making changes, who starts, creating architecture, basically as a Salesforce architect. But then the difference would be, okay, what is a technical architect? Is the person who went in there that made this change, are they a technical architect? Do they have the understanding of being able to see the bigger picture, being able to see what growth could look like, etc.? At what point did you, when did that shift happen for you? Like, when did you begin to see yourself as someone who could look at things from a wider perspective, or saw that there was more responsibility in that whole, role than you thought?
I think because coming from consultancy, I think the roles names are different, right? You kind of, rather than admin, you're a consultant. And I think, and also in an organization, you may not have a dedicated Salesforce architect, right? But the characteristics are kind of similar, right? In a sense of, I want to do best for my company. I get these problems from the company that they need to solve, and I need to work on what that solution should be. And I think for me was to be, that good Salesforce architect and a good ambassador or a good person within the organization. I really needed to understand those business problems and the goals of the organization, and even like the simple question, which is, why did they buy Salesforce in the first place, right? Which I think a lot of people, if you ask, who are working on a Salesforce org, have no idea, right?
Great point.
And I think that the root of, you can get, just people shouting, saying, we need this, great, you've got a big backlog of stuff, you're pushing stuff out, but is it actually delivering value, right, to the business? Are you measuring what's working or what isn't, and what is delivering value based on what you had before? And so that, I think, for me, was my turning point. Was I was working for an organization and we were just going through the backlog, right? And this was one person that was prioritizing it and things like that. And I'm like, well, this isn't value driven, right? We're not dribbling as much value as we could if we picked these stories, right? And so for me, that was when I was like, actually, now I need to kind of step up and actually be a bit more of a trusted advisor, you want to call it, or somebody that can actually say, look, actually, if we use this, do these user stories, we can get X, Y, and Z, which will help improve this. So and I think that's more valuable than this one, because, and then kind of using that as a kind of lever to start kind of shifting the thought process around, actually, let's create value-driven work rather than just whoever's shouting loudest, right?
I think absolutely. And, the point that you make, and it seems it's so true to me, because I also at some point got a little bit lost in the, in my conversations that I have with people, because I'm mostly speaking with admins and consultants and, architects and developers. And sometimes I leave a conversation and I go, wow, what is the relationship between this person and the actual users in Salesforce?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, do they even, of course, some people I speak to, their lives are to make the business run more smoothly and to make the lives of their users easier and better and everything like that. Some people I'll talk to, I'm like, I don't think anything that they were talking about has anything to do with their users. Who are they? They forget that Salesforce is actually a system that people use at the end of the day. And it's just like, it's their playground, And I think that's like a really interesting thing. Whereas you're coming and you're saying, yeah, look, the architect perspective has to be to look at it from a much broader point of view, of course, and to, in some ways bring in all the different needs. And as you said earlier, like what initially got you hooked on Salesforce, the reporting aspect. I said it to someone today. They just launched with Salesforce, and I was talking to them, and I said, I was talking about our platform, which we don't store any data, right? So we're a platform that pushes data to Salesforce, it pulls data from Salesforce, lets you work with Salesforce. Said, and we were talking specifically about surveys, a simple use case. And they're like, oh, so with your platform, so all the data is going to go into Salesforce. So we're going to do all the reporting in Salesforce. That I have no reason to be competing with Salesforce on reporting, right? And what you're saying is, obviously makes it even more true. Like, that's one of the things that got you originally. Yeah. Like Salesforce, one of the things that people buy it for is the reporting functionality. So if I'm getting more data in and making it more, functional, more valuable, well, the reporting is going to be better. And that's just such an important thing that like everyone needs to keep in mind, is that, hey, we want to build this system so that we can have better insights onto all the different parts of the business.
And I think also it's like, especially with my architect hat on and thinking like an architect, I want to go, right, in every kind of design I make, it's kind of like, right, firstly, if I didn't have Salesforce, how would I do it? And secondly, is there something in the ecosystem or something within the kind of landscape of the organization that already exists that we can use, and why wouldn't we not use that? And I think for that, definitely it puts a different spin on it. So okay, why don't I just use Salesforce surveys? It's there. Okay, let's use that, without kind of thinking, well, actually, you're going to have you can have problems with that over using something like Titan in your forms and your OCRing and all the other cool stuff you can do, right? And the design and really kind of getting it, the workflow of the form really nailed, right? And so I think, it's kind of understanding when not to use Salesforce, basically. Yeah. Right. And I think that's when you kind of get, and it goes back to that, actually, I don't care if it's Salesforce or not. I want to get back to that functional capability of actually what do we need and what is the best solution to fit that need and delivers the best value, right? For now and potentially in the unknown future as well, to keep it flexible. So, and surveys are a perfect example. It's like, could be, it's just getting the data into Salesforce, right? And then you can report on it. And then and it's the ease of creating those forms and design and stuff in that kind of brand that you need in an easy way, right? Rather than maybe a zillion other ways you could do it.
Yeah, and it was funny because this particular conversation I have with these people, they're new to Salesforce, and it was like, program manager, I don't know what his role is, but then there's also the Salesforce dev. And I kind of explained to him all the different things we could do. And the, manager guy, he goes, oh, so these are all things Salesforce could do, but you guys do it without code. I said, listen, yeah, Salesforce could do all of this, but first off, your, one dev isn't going to be enough to do it all. And in a couple of years from now, when you want to change something, it's not going to make any sense that you did that like the way you did it. And and I like the way he said it. He's like, oh, it could do all of this, because usually people come to me and they come to me the step after, where they go, we bought Salesforce and we thought that, we'd be able to generate documents from Salesforce for our quotes and this and that and everything.
Yeah.
But we found out we couldn't. And now we found out we need to take another tool. And we went on the App Exchange. We found you guys. I'm like, well, this is a great way to start a conversation. This is great. I'm like, by the way, I've heard this before. You bought Salesforce. Congratulations. You implemented Salesforce. Congratulations. You didn't realize that there was a key piece missing and that it didn't make sense to do it purely with Salesforce. That's why we're here. Fine. Let's start from there. But it was interesting to hear the way that guy said it. And it's cool that there isn't, to me, it's cool that there isn't like the clear limitations, but to the technical architect, that's actually you're saying the fine point where they go, okay, that's something we do off platform. That's something we do with something else. Maybe we're not going to, port the old legacy system in here completely and, dump it.
Yeah. And I think
we'll build it out in stages.
Yeah, and it's because understanding, it's not just the cost of getting the tool in, it's also supporting it, right, as well.
Exactly.
And you could create a load of Visualforce pages in Salesforce or Lightning pages that do the forms that are on a community, which is but then you need to know digital communities, you need to know LWC, you need to and how is that going to be supported in the future, right? So I think but obviously if you've got a team of people that are doing all that, then maybe it's more cost effective to do that rather than that. And, or I don't know, even security considerations, some companies, not Titan, but others where actually it's all processing data in the US, right? And things like this, which becomes a problem. So yeah, it's weighing them up, right? And coming up with the way that fits the particular organization.
So I did say that I wanted to get back to London's Calling at some point.
Yeah.
Where was the idea born out of, and what did you want to bring to the community? What do you think maybe you've been able to bring to the community, and what have you gotten from it?
So I think it really so Midwest Dreaming I think, which is in the US, which is another kind of the big event, a dreaming type event, that had just done their first kind of outing in the US. And we kind of saw that, we're like, hey, wait a minute, we've got all these community groups in London, at the time just London, and let's see if we can do a one-day event. So basically we're all out in Dreamforce, and a group of us kind of got together, and it was on the back of the napkin. I've got a photo of it actually. It was going to be a 2-day event. We were going to have all these sessions and develop and admin and everything else. And we got back to the UK and we realized actually it can only be a 1-day event to cost and things like this. But I think for us, it was more, it was a bit selfish, really. It was kind of like, I want to learn more about this, and this, right? Well, let's bring the community together and bring those people that know the best practices of doing this, and this. So we can kind of collaborate together and have a day of learning in London rather than whizzing all the way to Dreamforce in the US, which obviously costs loads for the ticket, for accommodation, for flights. It's just mental, especially when you're coming from Europe. Mm-hmm. And just make it our own, right? And have fun doing it. And I think that's kind of where it started from. And then then it was like, well, is anybody actually going to turn up? Which is the next thing. Who's going to pay for it? Where are we going to go? Is anybody going to sponsor it? Who knows? And yeah, and all those kind of challenges kind of came in. But yeah, no, it's fun. And it slowly grew, I think the first event we had about 200 people, and now we're kind of 900-ish plus coming, as well as all online. And actually that COVID year that I was talking about, that we got 8,000 people watching.
Oh, wow.
I think it's just perfect timing of everybody suddenly being at home and,
right.
But yeah, it was crazy. It took it down our website and everything. It was mental.
Yeah, I love it. And so the first year, were most of the people that were speaking, were they from the US or were they from all over?
No, they're all pretty much UK, I think, mostly, and maybe a bit of from the continent came over as well. But it was pretty much UK, although we did have keynote. I think Erica Cool, who was the community manager, did our first keynote. I think, or maybe a second, I can't remember. And there was a couple of people that came over from the US, but really Yeah, and the Salesforce in the UK wasn't brilliant. It wasn't mature back then. There was no UK marketing team or anything like that.
Mm.
Yeah, nothing. So everything was very much kind of driven from the US anyway. And us talking to the US, and I was an MVP, Salesforce MVP at that point, so I knew kind of people like Erica, who kind of kicked off the MVP program, the community way back right at the start. So yeah, it was a good fun journey. But yeah, and now it's we get people from the US, all over the world. I think we counted up, it's like 12 different countries or something people come from, I think.
That's a lot of fun. Yeah, and I mean, now you've got also all the the Salesforce sponsored events also in the UK. So
yeah,
there's a buzz. I mean, it's not like people look forward to these events, and I think it's just a great thing about the Salesforce community. I've spoken to a number of people on the podcast that are putting on events, and I know the first Ireland is coming up.
Yep.
And we're sponsoring it, and I spoke with Eric who's putting that on. And it's just exciting, and it's exciting always for new markets and new areas, and it's like also just giving back to the people who were involved, and I love that, and it's just fun to be there to see the energy. And my team's been all over lately in the past 6 months to some places, and I'm very interested to hear reviews about all these different community events. But it's special to see, and you don't see it in other places with other things, and people that are outside the ecosystem say, "What are you talking about? You're going to, what are you on to San Francisco for? You're going for a conference all the way to San Francisco. It's 3 days. It sounds more like a music festival, and in some ways it is. It's like it's like this big pilgrimage festival, and it's great to see people. It's great to connect. It's I met you in person just last year.
Yeah.
And at the they called it the App Exchange Live.
Yeah.
In London. And it's just good. It's just good to get out to see people, especially for many of us who work behind the screen all day and on Zoom. Or at least I'm on Zoom still. Everyone else is on Teams or something now. But
I'll be interesting to see how events work in the future, especially with AI and things like this, and how, like, even at the moment, the internet is getting flooded with AI content such that, now if you search, I think somebody showed a search for a squirrel and looked at the image search, and like most of them are AI, generated squirrels, right? And things like this. So, will there be a kind of a shift in trust on what people see online?
Right.
And actually, will that make in-person events more valuable because you're wanting to come and actually hear from the people that are the gurus in certain areas and not kind of broken content online? Maybe, I don't know. Or will it reduce? Who knows?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And even before AI at this point, it's like I think I was on a family vacation or something last year, and I'm trying to look up something on Google, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, every single thing I'm looking at is an SEO blog.
Yeah,
I can't find any. It was pages, and I started going through Google, page after page. No real curated content. Everything was for SEO. And, the flood that we're going to see with AI in so many different places with that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a great point. The in-person meetings might just get more important. I mean, at some point soon, this podcast could have maybe just been done with AI, and we could be, sit on the couch and we'd watch ourselves talking to each other about, what we're doing. We're actually probably feeding the machine right now by making the content. I did
a podcast. I did a talk. I can't remember. It might have been London's Calling or a Salesforce World Tour or whatever, which was the 10 top traits of a Salesforce architect or something like this. And at the end, I was like, why are you even here, right? You could have just gone on to ChatGPT and asked, right? And the top 10 is not too bad, right? But then, does AI start cannibalizing AI, right?
Right.
So if they're, at the moment, the models are good because it's based on all this pure content online. But now where do they get their content from if it's all AI generated content? And I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. But, AI is changing every day, it feels like. So, yeah. And I'm getting a lot more actually AI people on Salesforce Posse podcast. So there's some kind of gurus in the Salesforce world, but also outside of the Salesforce world around AI and how it is changing for that kind of customer interactions and human kind of centered kind of interactions as well. So
yeah, I spoke with I think it was with Mark Good about, it was already months ago, and I feel like so much has changed even just as I spoke to him. And yeah, do you have any thoughts right now on Agentforce, on everything that's going on, with Salesforce, and have you gotten a chance to really get into it?
Yeah, I think at the moment, well, my personal feeling is we've had all this, we've had the hype cycle of, oh my word, it's AI, it's going to take away all our jobs, in exactly the same thing that email was said to the postman and all this kind of stuff. You go, it's the same kind of hype cycle. And then there's like, oh my word, it's terrible. It's like the example of, if I ask it, how do you stop toppings sliding off a pizza? It says, just add glue, things like this, where it's kind of just going crazy.
Right.
But I think so now I feel we're kind of in a bit of a quiet period where people are going, okay, I get Agentforce, I get it, right? Kind of, but not really. And I know I need to do something about it, but I'm still not quite sure. But I think there's kind of like this coming tsunami, AI tsunami, that is then companies are going to start embracing it. And then suddenly it's not, in my opinion, not going to take away people's jobs. It's just going to make people more, you're going to still need that human kind of bit at the end.
Sure.
It's just going to, like all the productivity tools like Salesforce and everything that's happened over the years, we're just going to become more productive with the tools we have. But it's going to be a tsunami of suddenly all these companies becoming more productive, and it becomes this competitive advantage of needing to embrace AI, Agentforce, whatever it may be, to kind of be more competitive in the market. So yeah, what that will be, who knows? But yeah, do we go to more, industry built LLMs, which we're going to start harnessing rather than these kind of generative, public LLMs? Or are we going to move more into internal built LLMs, especially on our own actual data? Are they going to be are we merging LLMs together based on our internal data and industry-based? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting world, I think, going forwards. But at the moment, the big problem, I think, that companies is data, right?
Yeah.
You need to embrace AI. Your data's got to be correct, right? And established and cleaned, which is the classic data problem. And actually, one of the kind of Agentforce, was it Agentforce? I don't know if it was Agentforce or another agent client. Essentially, it came up with what looked like the wrong answer. But then when you look at where the data was grounded for that particular request, there was 2 knowledge articles that were basically contradicting each other. And so the AI just picked one, right? Because it didn't really know, and it would happen to be the wrong knowledge article, but it was grounding itself on this data that was inaccurate. So I think this is the bit that's going to be it looks really cool, but actually, how are you grounding this AI, and how are you then linking that to the actions you want the AI to perform? So, I built an action. The description of the action is that I can update my information, but then the way people talk, or English isn't their first language, to the agent might not get to I want to update my information discreetly. And so therefore that action doesn't appear in the AI agent. And so it's things like this that I think we're going to be tweaking and changing and trying to fine tune and trying to understand how we kind of get over these kind of little challenges, as well as the big challenge of data.
Absolutely. And I think maybe just to sum it up and to wrap up this episode, it sounds like, if there was a piece of advice that you'd give, and not to put words in your mouth, but if we want to move on to the next phase and we want to continue, let's go back to basics. Let's make sure that everything's in check. That you make your bed in the morning or whatever it is to make sure that things are clean. And then that only with that, we're going to be able to really continue into the future and to move to these next places, because otherwise, I think that's a great little anecdote you gave about the the knowledge article, because just like I was saying before about all these, the SEO articles that are all over the internet. If that's where we're going to pull our information from, well, the top 5 recommendations for you are this, and this. And who knows if anyone's even, if a human being even actually went to those 5 places and rated them, and then we're going to use that to drive the future decisions. Probably won't be the best. I
think
the best recipe.
So I think that's absolutely right. But also start small. Prove the ROI out. Don't try and clean up the entire knowledge base, tidy it up for certain products or services, and then just only use the agent or those products and services to prove out the ROI. So then you maybe got a better argument for doing it wider, right?
Absolutely, and that really just goes back to the idea of the technical architect and seeing, hey, what's it going to take to do this, and what's it going to take to undo this later on?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Listen, really appreciate your perspective, Francis. Always a pleasure to speak with someone who's got experience in the field, experience in the ecosystem, and also is able to contribute something. So I really appreciate your time, and it's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, and thanks for joining us on Salesforce Radio.
Cool. See ya.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Salesforce Radio. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting discussions, expert tips, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders. Stay connected with Titan, plus the power of the planet's leading CRM. See you next time.